Hello, hello. Thank you guys for joining me for another edition of Mental Maintenance. Um, all right, I gotta. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, today we're gonna same thing as always. I'm going to just kind of introduce you guys and then let the music play out a little bit for you guys. But what I am going to be talking about today is idolatry and idolatry in our society. Should be interesting. A lot of takes that I could kind of go on this one. A lot of different ways that you can interpret this. As time goes on, we might try to see if I can get more interaction in regards to this topic. This one comes courtesy of my uncle, who I'm actually really glad I was able to get his input on it because just somebody older, see what they kind of look at and view as being like a issue right now that society faces and that we personally face. And the one that he came up with was idolatry. So I'm going to try to deep dive a little bit into that one for you guys today. Like I said, gonna let the music just kind of play out for a little bit, and when that is over with, then we'll kind of dive into this one. So enjoy, guys. All right. All right. Thank you, guys. Yes. We are going to. I almost wanted to let that play out right there at the end a little bit longer, but whatever. Idolatry. Same as always. Start with what I view it as, and then we'll go into the actual definition of it. Idolatry. So I think this is just kind of like the obsession esque that obsession esque behavior that we participate in um, when over people, entities, things. This can be products, this can be people, this can be businesses, this can be communities, this can be even figures. Like, there's a lot of different figures. I'm not going to really go too much in the figure side because I'm going to try to avoid being too controversial in the show. But, figures. There's figures that we idolize. And so, yeah, just kind of want to dive into exactly how we do that, how much we do that, what's kind of been the cause of that per se. At least in my opinion. Again, everything here is going to be coming from my opinion. I'm not necessarily looking up anything in regards to these matters. But going into the definition, this definition comes from Oxford again. Idolatry is the extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. So our definitions more or less kind of line up in this one. Yeah. Do we have a problem with this? Let's start with that. I do believe we have a problem with this. I do think that that problem kind of stems from the technological and social media age that we are in. I actually work in this world, the social media world, so I'm not gonna sit here and say, "Oh, social media is ruining us" or "it's this terrible thing." I don't think that. I think there's many positives. I know for a fact because I work with many positives that come from the social media world, but I do think that social media has been a catalyst to us in regards to our idolatry and the people and things that we do kind of obsess over and have an extreme reverence over. Now, is this a bad thing? That is a subjective answer. That's very, very, very subjective. I would say overall, as we are today, I do believe that this is a bad thing. I think that the social media influencers, the entertainers, the even politicians that we somewhat idolize today, the companies that we idolize today, we don't really put that much thought into this. It kind of goes back to it kind of goes back to when I was talking about impulsiveness. I think that our idea of idolizing is something that we don't put a lot of thought behind. We don't really take it into consideration too much. We just kind of do it. We just do it with different things and different people. And we want to be like them. We want to constantly know about their success. We want to know about whatever rumors they share. We want to know whatever skits or whatever they do, whatever this person or entity does, because we look at our own lives as being not as entertaining and not as substantial as that person's, that we want to know everything about theirs. We want to act like them. We want to emulate them. We want to show out at a party by expressing some of the behaviors that they do because we see the reaction that they have. And ultimately, the bulk of people who we do idolize, they aren't necessarily like, I never really hear anybody say like, I idolize a scientist, or I idolize a doctor, I idolize my teacher. We don't really do it for people in that vanity and in that nature. We more or less do these things for, again, like social influencers and entertainers, sports figures, politicians. And, my thing is, we probably do need to we need to be conscious that we do this, that we do idolize. And the reason why I think we need to be conscious of it is so that way we can know how to pull it back. Now, I don't think that there's any problem with you admiring maybe a social influencing figure, or a celebrity, or a sports athlete, or a politician. I mean, for each one of those, I can give you a positive example of them. I really can. Like, if we sat here, the one guy, I can't think of his name right now, but there's one, like, I would refer to as like a social influencer. He started out on YouTube, but he does a lot of donations, and he is very philanthropical. He this you Whoever's listening to this, especially if you're in the younger audience, you know exactly who I'm talking about. He's gone to like different countries and helped different educational programs and help people locally, and he does literally YouTube videos where he talks specific, or he the whole entire video is centered around him actually doing something philanthropic for another person or entity, and he constantly has created a brand from this. Now, if you say, yeah, I kind of idolize him and it's for something like that, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If you say the same thing for a sports athlete who, is in really good shape, and you say, you have somewhat of an idolization around them, they promote tremendous health. They promote good dieting. They promote things that could potentially save a person's life. So, if you look at them and you aspire to kind of have some of the qualities that they have, again, I don't think that's a bad thing. There's politicians who are constantly trying to stand up for what's right and trying to think about the people in their community. There's local politicians that fit this bill a lot. I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. But again, um, I don't think that this is what most of us idolize in these types of groups of people. I think what we idolize is the behavior that is giving the response that the mass majority of us tend to show and tend to act like we enjoy. These are things that are more nefarious. These are things that are more immature. These are things that are more sexualized. These are things, it's all of these natures that we happen to follow them for and idolize them for. And I think that it's just important, especially if you're younger and you're listening to this, just that you have some type of a conscious, a self-conscious understanding that, these are things that you, in the grand scheme of who you are as a person, maybe don't necessarily want to promote. And you should try to challenge yourself to have just a little bit more separation, if you ask me. Now, I'm not a professional. I'm not trying to pose as a professional. I'm not trying to say that I know any better. I'm not trying to say that my way is right. Again, I always bring these things to you guys on the basis and on the idea that I also struggle with these things. And I do. Like, there is more or less idolization that I probably can identify in myself. If I really sat here and took the time to do it with you now, won't necessarily go on that. It's more of a personal thing, but there's definitely figures that could probably be looked at like that I need to be able to understand. Okay, there might be qualities to them that I do look up to, but there's a difference between looking up to them and acknowledging them and necessarily idolizing them, which I may not need to do because of just the type of person that I am and who I want to be, who I aspire to be. So, that's when I bring this to you, I'm not bringing it to kind of like shake or wag a finger at you. I'm doing it to just say, I think we all can probably take a step back and just kind of take a look at what it is exactly that we're doing when we follow these people on social media networks and read about their lives and buy memorabilia. And who exactly are these people that we're doing this with? Why are we doing it with these people? And then how can we kind of separate the obsessive behavior from the acknowledgement that we may want to just give? And I do think that for the most part, I'm still of belief that most people want to do good. Most people want to be good. If that is in fact true, which again, maybe it's glass half full, and I'm just looking at it that way. I'm being as optimistic as possible, and maybe the more appropriate way of looking at it is the more glass half empty side, the more pessimistic side. But I just kind of refuse. Something in me refuses to look at people like that. I think that I prefer the idea of thinking that we do still ultimately, for the most part, the collective of us and society and the world, we really do strive for peace and good, and we want like things like that. We can't allow these obsessions that we have to be harbingers for the opposite. So that's where, I think that again, just it's important for us to just kind of pull ourselves back a little bit and take the time to realize where exactly we lie in these things. How do we do this? Again, I'm not an expert. If you do find that it is something that you struggle with, I recommend researching how these things have looked in past societies, and what studies have been done for how exactly it exists in current societies. Just see how much you line up to it, and definitely see what the professional recommendations would be. But at the end of the day, like I said, I'm talking to myself as much as I talk to you guys. And the reality is that you have to kind of want to see how you like what works for you and how you can kind of push back against these behaviors. What I try to do is just kind of like limit how much I actually use my social media in regards to specific figures, in regards to specific organizations, in regards to specific collectives and such. That's been really helpful for me. Anybody who knows me knows I don't really have a social media presence. So it does help a lot in not having a social media presence to distance myself. It's really like the best answer that I have is just being able to create some form of distance. There's another good answer that I have, but we'll get into that in a second. I understand that, the idea of distancing yourself from social media and from the influences that do kind of prop up these idolizations that we have. I do understand where that could be difficult for a lot of people. Your social life may exist through your social media and social application presence. And for some people, even your livelihood maybe is predicated in these social media engagements that you do have. And again, that's true for me, but I don't necessarily say that, you have to necessarily completely remove yourself away from it. It's just kind of, again, I'm the extreme end of it with the social media presence that I have. I'm definitely on the side of being the more extreme side of it. And I really don't expect you to be, nor do I think that you need to be, nor do I think that it's a good thing for you to necessarily be. Different strokes for different folks, as the expression goes. So, don't think that having a almost non-existent presence in the case of me is necessarily the best thing that's going to work for you. But again, trying to introduce some type of balance, some type of separation that you have, some type of acknowledgement. Typically, when we do things from an obsessive or an addictive point of view, it kind of falls back, again, going back to the impulsivities, but it kind of goes back to our impulsive nature. We created an impulse around this person, which has kind of fostered and strengthened the idea of us idolizing them. So what can just putting yourself more into that thought-based frame of mind, especially when you're trying to go view or witness that next thing about that person, just kind of having a conscious moment with yourself and saying, okay, I'm kind of borderline and obsessive here with this person. Do I really need to notice or realize this? Is there something else that I can go and do at this moment? Is there something else that I can even look into in this moment? As opposed to this obsessive behavior that I have over this person or thing. They're not gonna, here's the thing, the people who you do these things for, you make them money, you give them status, you give them a plethora of different things when you do give in to the obsessive nature that you have over them. So for these reasons, and if we do kind of empathize with them for a second, you can't blame them. Like, if you're making a livelihood from it and that livelihood is around the attention you get, you almost want every single person who comes into contact with you to be almost obsessive over you or obsessive over the product that you're selling, and etc. So I wouldn't even necessarily get too upset with the fact that it more than less is a reality that they're not going to stop doing the things that bring you in and that make you the way that you are around them. It's going to really be one of those things that's kind of up to you. You're going to have to figure out what will work, what's going to work best to get you separated from the behavioral response that you're having in this case. Just take your time, meet yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, okay, what can I do or what should I be doing to kind of separate myself from this? Don't, if you start feeling as if you feel like ashamed once you start to realize exactly how your nature is with this, don't realize everyone else is doing the exact same thing for the most part right now, but don't leave yourself in the group. Don't just be one more cog in the machine. Don't just be one more sheep or cattle on the farm. Try to do something to separate yourself for yourself. A lot of times these obsessive behaviors we have, if they sow anything, they sow more insecurities within ourselves. So don't allow for that to be something that can happen to you as a result of how, the attraction that you have to these figures or to these products or to these things or to these groups. Don't do that to yourself. Give yourself that breath to understand, use that time to understand yourself better. Use more of that time to try understanding yourself better. See what there is that you can give to the world, as opposed to obsessing over what another person is giving. Again, I just think the biggest reason why you want to be able to do these things is because we get lost in the fact of exactly how much these things influence us and can have an influence on us. So you don't want that to be the case with you. I mean, I always in these shows try to look at like what's the worst that can come from this behavior or from this act that we do. This is another example where not trying to practice these things can actually lead to people losing their lives. It can lead to communities suffering. There's a ton of different things like this that can occur from us giving into this idolized behavior, this idolatry that we practice. And then from a religious or spiritual component, for anybody who's listening to this that exists and lives in that realm and world, we aren't, typically in a lot of our beliefs, we aren't supposed to idolize anything outside of the God that we believe in and such. So, if you are a spiritual or religious person, you kind of are doing an injustice to what it is that you're supposed to believe in by giving so much power and obsession to these worldly figures and worldly things. So it's just something to think about. I definitely highly recommend people think about it from that perspective and just kind of see where you exactly fit in that. What role you have in that. Again, I do believe there are instances where it can be more of a positive thing. It just depends on how exactly you're looking at it and utilizing it. Example of this, where, or at least on the negative side of it, there's certain the music is such a varying and diverse thing. It has so many different messages, so many different sounds, so many different meanings behind it and within it. But somebody who idolizes somebody who makes songs that are in reference to somebody losing their life or betrayal or just kind of more negative actions and concepts, that idolization may cause that person to start acting on those same things being discussed and manipulated within the actual lyrics of the song or the behavior from the person that they're idolizing. Sexuality. This is another thing. If you are looking at somebody or idolizing, obsessing over somebody who the most that they promote is in fact sexuality, it might not necessarily be completely a bad thing. There is some liberation that may be at play in that person's behavior that is something that can make you less insecure about yourself. And again, it's not necessarily saying that you shouldn't be able to acknowledge that. I don't want to take you away from being able to acknowledge that. But if this is the only thing that this person does, you start to have to understand, or you'll have to start to consciously think about, how much is this behavior that this person shows me, which is probably not even the full totality of who they are, but is what they're showing me, what they're pushing on me, and in turn I'm obsessing over it. How much is that actually playing a part in the behaviors that I'm demonstrating in the course of the world and in the course of my life? And you shouldn't want to necessarily be that one-dimensional aspect that person that you're idolizing is showing. They may show you that side of them, but there's more sides to them that you just don't see, and you don't obsess over that. You obsess over the image that they give you. So you have to just start to think about like how certain things like this have an influence on you, the harm that it can cause you, the harm that it can cause another, the harm that it can cause a community. Just kind of start to give these things thought, and I think that, again, if you just can have some level of separation between these things, you'll be able to do a lot of good, not just for yourself, but for the people around you, the community around you. And then it'll put more emphasis on the people who you are obsessing over to share different sides of themselves, something where they can maybe ring back in your acknowledgement of them, but in a way that you can appreciate them differently, as opposed to the same one that you keep obsessing over. It's the work that it's the work. Everything that we talk about here is just going to come down to the work that you're willing to put in. It comes down to what you're willing to do in regards to acknowledging that this is a behavior that exists in yourself. The work that it has to be put into the game plan that you're going to have to kind of combat these things and move forward from these things. Um, these are all things that's just up to you. You got to kind of figure out what works for you, how it works for you. And then I think, whatever balance you can come to, as long as a balance does exist, if it works for you, I'm not here to judge you. I don't think that anybody else should necessarily judge that other person for that. But we are at the point now where I feel like conversations like this aren't had enough, to where people are starting to become a dependency for others. And, I don't, unless you're married to a person, or you're living with a person, or you have a arrangement with another person where your life is kind of directly intertwined with theirs and the actions that both of y'all do, I don't think that you necessarily need to be moving about, or have your entire character or your stream of thought or your stream of conscious or your stream of action be derived specifically from this one-dimensional angle of this person or thing or company or brand or whatever it may be. So, again, just kind of thinking about these things in regards to yourself and seeing what exactly you can possibly do to create more of a balance, and to also allow the side of you that you might be feel a little bit more insecure about. There's that side of you that you can share, and that you can you can be more expressive of and have more confidence behind. So giving yourself the time to think about that portion of yourself too, and as opposed to dedicating that time to obsessing over another person, is really good. It'll give you more. It'll make you love life, appreciate life more. It'll make you appreciate yourself more. It'll improve on your relationships, not just with yourself and with your health and with your mind and with your spirit, but also just with other people. They'll be able to understand you. They'll be able to maybe even acknowledge you in certain points and uniqueness that you exhibit. They'll be able to acknowledge those things in the same way that you were trying to acknowledge whatever it was that you were trying to acknowledge in that person, thing, entity, brand, whatever that you were obsessing over. So, it's just a nice little thought for you guys. The other angle that I was going to say that can kind of help, I said I was going to come back around to this, is the idea of, looking for different things to not necessarily idolize, but different entities and things to acknowledge. Like, do you acknowledge the sacrifices and the ability and such that your teacher has, or your doctor has, or your firefighter has, or the police officer, or your congressman, or your community leader, or your pastor? These people where you can have, you could put more acknowledgement in regards to them, and seeing what they do and learning from what they do, and seeing how these things can maybe help you to become a better person. Even just people, like, it could be a next door neighbor, just somebody on the street who is like an auntie to everybody, and you just notice that you do appreciate them for that, but you don't necessarily acknowledge them, the same way you would a rapper or a social influencer or a politician or whoever. You don't necessarily give the same reverence, even though this person is right here in your face and there's something that you appreciate about them. You can acknowledge them, and maybe acknowledge them in a way where you start to take on some of the more positive behaviors that they express. I think that is another good way for us to kind of pivot from the ideology or the idolatry that we have. Yeah, I think that instead of having these idolized behavior, or the idolization that we have within our behavior towards these figures who we've never even met or seen, trying to look within your local community and the local spaces, a family member, a friend, a doctor, a teacher, a community worker, a priest, a pastor, whoever. I think that these things can be more beneficial for us to just kind of look in and find things that we can acknowledge and then incorporate in ourselves, than necessarily the celebrity who we know really nothing about. We are just about at 30 minutes here, guys, so I am going to wrap up. Again, anything regarding this material where we kind of focus on the psychological, mental, and social things that we maybe don't think enough about, or could put more thought behind or towards. You can catch that here on Mental Maintenance. We will also be having a series. I'm not sure if it's out at the time that this is coming out, but we also will be having a series called Croco Cares, where we will be talking about real world issues that are going on, and just news in general that is going on in the world, and try to just kind of get a better understanding of it. I'm going to be learning as I talk to you guys about it. So again, and none of this stuff am I expert in the area, but it is something where I feel like, in my journey of wanting to learn more and know more and understand more, I can bring you guys along, and maybe you can get something from it as well. So look forward to that in Croco Cares, which should be coming soon. In regards to our anime, comic book, and just nerd and geek culture as things, that has been completely moved away from Croco's Corner and into a show called Squad Nero. This podcast with me and some of the people that you have seen before in Croco's Corner and some that you haven't. That show airs on Sundays or Mondays, usually in the evenings on Twitch at Smooth Entertainment. You can find more information out regarding that stuff if you're into the geeky and nerdy stuff that we've talked about on here before. You can find that information at Squad, SQUAD, Nero, NERO podcast, PODCAST, on Instagram. It'll have everything up on there, plus any content from Croco's Corner as well. Just go to the Croco's Corner page on Instagram, and you will be able to find more details on that, and as well as that on any other show we have. But that is all that I have for you guys today. I'm just going to let some of the music just kind of run out here just to end the show. Thank you guys as always, and yeah, take care.